All right, we're here to talk business succession planning here today. Planned exit or unexpected pivot. Just going to wait a couple moments for everyone to join in, and we'll get this thing moving. Good. All right, everyone, just one more minute. Again, business succession planning discussion, planned exit or unexpected pivot. That's what we're talking about. We're going to get started here in just a moment while everyone's joining in.
That is a great smile from Gina.
How can she hold that pose?
That's what I keep thinking. Yeah.
If nothing else, while we're waiting for everybody to join, a good smile is all you can give everyone, you know? All right, a couple more people filtering in. Get moving here in just a moment. All right, I think the time has come. Let's get this started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us here today. My name is Steven Frey, and I'm Director of Business Solutions at SDA Wealth Strategies. I am delighted to host today's webinar regarding business succession planning, titled Planned Exit or Unexpected Pivot. Before we get started, just a few quick things to mention. We do encourage the audience to submit questions during the presentation via the chat function. Again, we will have some Q&A at the end of the discussion. There's a separate button for that. We will be recording today's webinar and making it available to everyone following the presentation. So look out for the link. Business owners very often are curious about how much money they can get if they sell their business. When they get an opinion or even a professional evaluation, the response is often, that's not enough. They consider their business to be their retirement plan, but they're so entrenched in the day-to-day operation, the journey of their business, that they put blinders on and just keep working until they're ready to hang it up. When you talk about retirement planning in general, there's a sentiment of the sooner you start, the better off you'll ultimately be. This idea also applies to business owners who are really looking to have a successful exit. Otherwise, they may feel pressure as they reach the end of their road just to execute with the first remotely attractive deal that comes along. Investment bankers, mergers and acquisitions advisors, brokers, they're typically focused on just selling the business, whether the terms are best for the client or not. Very important to not only have a vision of what your business and life looks like after exiting the business, also to enlist the right professionals to partner with during that journey to deliver the desired outcome. Business owners have a habit of being reactive, and this is one of many topics that might not be addressed until the 11th hour, often because a significant amount of time is spent on the daily operations of the business. So on that note, we appreciate everybody choosing to spend some time with us here today, an hour out of the 11th hour. We really appreciate it. I'm thrilled to be here. We have some great folks to hear from today. At this point, I'd like to have our special guests introduce themselves. Roger Joyce, Governance Advisor and former Vice Chairman and EVP of the BILCO Company. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be here, and I welcome all your guests to this forum. This is, I think, going to be very interesting. A little bit about my background. I born and raised in Connecticut, but went to college in Pennsylvania at Lafayette College. And I had a very interesting course of study there that was pretty unique at the time. I was interested in engineering, but I didn't know which type of engineering might make sense for me. So I joined a Bachelor of Arts in Engineering degree program, which at the time was the only one of its type. It worked out great for me because I was able to work in 3 different disciplines: civil, mechanical, and industrial. And as luck would have it, I used every one of those in my career. So I'm very pleased with how that went. I started my career as a spring design engineer here in Connecticut. There's kind of a heart of the spring industry in this country around Hartford. And it's a very unique business, if you will. And I had the opportunity to be immersed in the design side of it, so that even at 24, 25 years old, I was designing fuel injector springs for Robert Bosch in Germany. I designed seat belt retractor springs for General Motors. And my most favorite project ever was designing suspension springs for the actor Paul Newman for his race car. That was a lot of fun. I actually, in 3 days, designed and built those springs, delivered them to Lime Rock Park in Connecticut, and saw him and Jordan Woodward, sipping coffee next to their Airstream in the infield. He used those springs and won the race. It was his first race he ever won. So we had a real happy customer. So I was doing that kind of work for about 5 years. And then I got a call from one of my uncles at the BILCO Company, which is our family business. They were recruiting for a plant manager, and I had that experience. And we started to talk about that opportunity for me. I wasn't real excited about it, actually, and I had my own career path going pretty well, and was a little unsure about working with family, and they were unsure about hiring family, literally. And they made a point that resonated with me, and that is, now, Roger, if there's another candidate for this position who's any better than you in any way, you're not getting the job. So I thought about that, and I wasn't insulted. As a matter of fact, I respected that position.
Sure.
Because they were doing the right thing for the company. This wasn't about making a job for everybody in the family. And they stuck to their guns and ultimately did hire me. And it went very well. I had lots of opportunity in a company in a growth mode. When I joined the company, they had one factory in West Haven, Connecticut, which was their headquarters location as well. But in time, as I became, moved on from plant manager to VP of manufacturing, VP of engineering, EVP and vice chair, along the way over 36 years, the demand for BILCO products was growing rapidly, and we were bursting at the seams in terms of production capacity. So my very first year on the job, we opened a second plant in Arkansas, and subsequently 4 more plants over the decades to meet the demand. It was a lot of work and great fun. Another project that I worked on, or a series of projects actually, when I was VP of engineering, headed the R&D department and product development. We had a great team of very smart people. And during that period, we generated and were awarded 18 patents for new products. Wow. Which helped propel the growth of the company. I was awarded 6 of those patents, and I got to tell you, it's an intense amount of work to accomplish that, but very rewarding, because what we were doing is addressing direct customer needs with products that never existed before, and we satisfied their needs on a particular project, and then turned it into a product line that we could sell to other people. Ultimately, I retired in 2016 when we had a liquidity event. We'll talk a lot more about that later. But that allowed me then to do some other things, such as being a governance advisor. I've served on corporate and nonprofit boards for 40 years, and I learned a few things in that time about how to govern well. So I'm helping small to mid-sized businesses govern their businesses in a more effective way, and especially choosing the right people to be on those boards. So that's been very rewarding as well. So in a nutshell, Steve, that's my life in 5 minutes.
Very much appreciate you being here. I know we're going to get a lot from the discussion on being as effective and efficient as possible with your way of being. But yeah, before we get deep into it, also wanted to introduce Mike Wiebe once again, founder of the risk management and insurance consulting firm Wiebe and Associates, to give some perspective on risk management in general, but also in the pursuit of the goal to have a successful business succession. So, Mike, introduction. Floor is yours.
So I've been in the risk management business for about 5 decades, but like Roger, I started with an engineering degree, but different from Roger is that I went to it in a different direction because of a company car. And so my first job was in the loss prevention division of an insurance company. And that's where I started to learn the risk management business. For the last 2 decades, I've had my own consulting firm. And I'm considered an in-house resource for my clients for the issues of survival and resilience for a business from unexpected events, nowadays known as enterprise risk management, or ERM. I'm the founder of Scott Coopersmith, and I began a partnership in 2012, SDA, which is behind Steve's profile there. And my longest stint as an employee in the corporate world was 13 years at IBM, and I was the worldwide risk manager when I left in the late 90s. IBM was one of the early adopters of the principles of ERM, enterprise risk management. So I had some good training in it. And this is all a BILCO story, so I'm going to give it back to Steve and Roger.
So we have the two sides of the spectrum for the topic of discussion. We have the planned exit with BILCO, and we have the unexpected pivots from the Mike Wiebe perspective. But quickly about me. I'm Steven Frey, Director of Business Solutions with SDA Wealth Strategies, business consultant and advocate with over 20 years experience. I'm a veteran sales strategy, business development executive. I look to bring a unique perspective and understanding on how people, process, and products can help solve some of the most complex business challenges. A great deal of my time is spent cultivating relationships with not only organizational leaders, but their trusted advisors as well, with an end goal of delivering best-in-class human capital management and business solutions. I also host a weekly live talk show called Always FreyDay on talkradio.nyc, which is a weekly reflection on SMB topics through the eyes of those business leaders as well as their trusted advisors. The interviews that I conduct, they tend to focus on the method, madness, and message related to the topics of discussion, which is exactly what we're going to do here today. Again, this webinar is brought to you by SDA Wealth Strategies, a boutique financial services firm in the Hudson Valley, New York area, offering personal wealth management and comprehensive business solutions for clients. As for simplifying financial lives, designing financial strategies, and advocating to implement them. SDA offers a concierge experience for individuals and businesses. The firm's highest priority is always the client's best interests while empowering the people and business to be consciously proactive and to thrive today, tomorrow, and beyond. To learn more, visit sdawealthstrategies.com. So a quick perspective on the topic of the day before we get everything moving here. I interviewed a gentleman last week on my radio show, Damon Pistolka, who is co-founder and managing director of a company called Exit Your Way, a group that's focused on maximizing the profitability and success for business owners who are looking to transition to retirement. So Damon and Exit Your Way, they reference 12 steps in their methodology for a successful exit. And number 1 and number 12, very relevant to this conversation. Number 1, start early. Everything in between, we're going to hear from Roger in just a few moments. Number 2, maximize profitability. Number 3, minimize the working capital. Number 4, know the value of your business, which is sometimes a surprise for certain business owners. Number 5, develop a sales pipeline that shows the historical growth and future growth potential. Number 6, get owners out of the critical path, which is sometimes takes more than a smile. Number 7, get the financial records and controls in order. Number 8, get the business records in order. Number 9, look at the business from the viewpoint of the buyer. Number 10, physically prepare the business for sale. Number 11, show potential buyers how to be successful. And last but not least, number 12, seek professional advice. So according to the Society of Human Resource Management, there are 3 reasons why business succession plans fail. The successor fails to build support due to the lack of early success, being ineffective at influencing or not building the right relationships. Number 2, the succession process is mismanaged, perhaps by waiting too long to initiate it or mishandling the search. And number 3, how the incumbent CEO and management team actually hand off the mantle of authority to the successor, including their continued relationship. So the active succession planning, focused process for keeping talent in the pipeline, generally a 12 to 36 month process, if you want to give it a kind of a minimum timeline of preparation, not pre-selection. Business leaders, they believe that succession planning is a complex process and a practice that's restricted to some of the largest organizations out there with the most sophistication. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It can have tremendous, tremendous value for small businesses that have fewer resources available to them. Now, with that said, many business owners do not have the luxury of making a long-term plan to execute the most ideal plan for their exit strategy. But they do sometimes experience an event that causes them to change course, and they need to manage expectations for the next steps of their succession process. Just a quick personal story before we really get into this. I have a friend who owns his own business in the real estate world, and he's in the hospital right now after suffering a heart attack earlier this week. Somebody who's in their late 30s, so a little bit of a shock. But this individual always thinks that they're invincible, and everything is very day-to-day and focused on the journey of the business, not so much thinking about the destination and the end game. So, really hope that the discussion we have here today is going to be a wake-up call for folks out there. We're going to hear the story behind a very successful transition from someone who represented the 3rd generation of a family-owned business. In fact, when asked if there was one thing he could go back and change in retrospect, looking at how it was carried out, he really couldn't even come up with anything, which I feel like that's very few and far between. So Roger, again, a retired manufacturing professional who spent his career inspiring people to achieve great things, great record of accomplishment that prepared him to resolve situations that others see as daunting, if not impossible. So very skilled in the corporate and nonprofit governance, strategic planning, and managing significant transitions. Roger enjoys helping companies and their people excel, not just himself and his company, but others out there as well. Before we get into Roger's story, I know that Mike wanted to set the stage for just a moment on the idea of the journey versus the destination. So Mike, over to you.
So Steve, you outlined a good sort of checklist of things. And the last one is my favorite: get professional advice. And I interpret that as don't try this alone at home. But I think there are some other aspects of business succession involving a little more introspection by the business owner and the founder. We all, every business owner works every day very hard to answer the simple question, what is success? And my experience with business succession planning is that it integrates short-term business decisions with long-term succession goals. And I think it's kind of interesting. We talked about stories. There's a story here, and the story is that the business owner really has to think about writing the script of a journey of the succession of the business. In other words, writing their story. And their story starts every day with decisions that he makes every day, he or she. The big decisions dictate the chapters. And how do you write the next chapter? What are the desires that a business owner has to establish the last chapters? And how do you assure clients, customers are well served? How do you retain key employees? How do you provide security for stakeholders such as vendors and suppliers? Do you want to protect the brand? What will be the epilogue of your story? And what do you want your legacy to be? And the best advice, don't try this alone at home. Roger, take it away.
Great advice, Mike. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the BILCO story and putting into context how a long history of family ownership and the growth of a company put us in the position we were, leading up to preparation for a liquidity event. So I think the background's important and very interesting, I might add. It's the story of a small metal fabricating shop in New Haven with a few employees becoming the world leader in their field. It's a rather incredible leap, if you will, from selling products locally to some local utilities to selling products in 42 countries. So let me start then with my grandfather, who started all of this in 1926. But even before that, he was a very bright, mechanically minded individual. And he filed for a patent that was awarded his first patent when he was 18 years old for a very complicated machine. And subsequently had many more to his credit. But in 1926, he opened the BILCO Company as a metal fabricating shop. Had some welders and metal formers, metal workers with him, who were making wrought iron railings and fire escapes and fencing, basically. And then they moved into products, actual hatches, mostly utility vault hatches that they still make today, and sold those to local water, gas, electric utilities. And then, wouldn't you know it, as the business was growing, the Great Depression hit. So all business, all construction, all commerce came to a halt. So Grandpa's banker said, "George, you better just declare bankruptcy and drop this whole idea, close the company." He refused to do that. He didn't, he had customers who weren't paying him, first of all, for past work, but he had suppliers he owed money to. And he didn't think it was fair to them to declare bankruptcy and let them go unpaid. So he hung on, and within a couple of years, business slowly started. He hired back his old crew, and they were gaining more traction now and growing. And he was able it took a few years, but he was able to pay off all those outstanding debts in full, and then continue with at that point some very loyal suppliers, I'm sure. So it was a lesson in integrity, is one way to look at it. This is fair dealing. He had every opportunity to do it another way, and he wouldn't do that. So just about the same time, maybe 1935, 1936, he had this idea of designing a metal basement door. He had, and he designed this so that he was really tired of repairing his wooden hatchway. So the steel door was created and patented itself. I received that patent late in the 30s. And he started marketing it because all of his neighbors in New Haven wanted one. So he figured, well, maybe I could make this a product I could sell broadly. And he did start selling it regionally around Connecticut. So he had this vision of national distribution of this product. So here he is still with a small shop. It's reported that he spent virtually all his extra money from the business on full page, full color ads in Better Homes and Gardens magazine, so that the brand could be seen across the country. So in the early 40s, he was doing that continuously. And his banker said, "George, it's so foolish. Why are you wasting your time on ads that no one's going to read?" So he never stopped. He kept stubbornly going forward. And as luck would have it, World War II ended. A huge housing boom occurred after that. And it seemed like everyone in the country wanted a BILCO door. So that insistence on that piece of marketing was a great investment for the company. And the company grew rapidly because of it. About this time, he had 5 sons who joined the business over a period of time after the war and into the 50s. My mother was the 6th child. she was not invited because of the fact she was told that women don't belong in manufacturing, have no place in the shop. So she didn't agree, but had no choice. So she, supported her dad and her brothers nonetheless in their venture. In the very interesting and fortunate reality of those 5 brothers was each one of them had a very unique experience and skills to bring to the business that were different. Manufacturing, engineering, finance, advertising, real estate. It was all spread across these 5 individuals. So the fact was every one of them made a significant contribution to the business, and that was a great leap forward. One example of that is my uncle, who was our chief engineer and product designer, was able to focus on that part of the business and product development. He earned 22 or 23 patents himself in these products, and every product was needed in the marketplace. So he'd get that out there, and he'd be working on the next one already to satisfy another need. So the fact that we had a brand, the fact that we had a lot of also commercial products now being distributed, ultimately led to the point where I joined the company in 1979. Just maxed out in space and really need more production space. So I spent a good part of my first year not only managing the plant in West Haven, but also helping build a new plant in outside of Memphis. So that particular outpost, if you will, again, first time we had ever done this before, but we had really good people, really a good deal of confidence in the product, lots of customers out there. And now we were closer to many of our important customers. This was a great point of distribution for products. That plant had grown steadily, encouraged us to open a plant outside of Salt Lake City. We opened a plant in Juarez, Mexico. We opened a plant outside of Columbus, and all in order to be closer to our customers. Shipping our products was expensive because they're large, they're heavy, and being closer to our customers, we could deliver them at lower cost and sooner than before. So I think, in the context of this, there were a number of transitions that occurred. The entrepreneur grandfather to the sons, and that went very well. And then into the 3rd generation, I must repeat that the uncles were very careful about who they chose, and that was a huge help. My cousin Bob Lyons followed me. I had the engineering manufacturing background. Bob he was a CPA in Chicago. He had finance and marketing experience. It was a perfect fit for the company to take it to the next level. So I recall this like it was yesterday, even though this is probably 35 years ago. We were having this conversation, the board was, about growth, and Bob and I were very keen on doing international work, especially into Europe. And it's about the time the uncles were looking to retire, and they were risk averse at that point, and they were concerned about a number of things, especially, and this is Mike's world now, worried about what could happen, what could go wrong here. And they had a long list of things that could go wrong. And for a while, it stumbled. But we had a outside advisor who was working with us. And he was specifically chosen because he was known and respected by the uncles, and he was kind of in that generation. But he realized this was a really smart thing to do. So he helped us convince the uncles, let's just try this. And we did, and it was a great success. And it encouraged us to push further into newer markets, even more. And the fact that we had continued product development coupled with the market development was well timed, if you will. and the manufacturing capabilities that we had kept pace with that. So that's why we were able, through a lot of cooperation, with a lot of people, and not just family cooperation, but cooperation amongst all our associates, all our employees, many of whom were 3 generations as employees themselves in the company. So that depth of experience, knowledge, and loyalty was another key to the success of us going forward. So that's the background. Now, the meat of this, I think the many lessons to be learned is started for us 10 years before the liquidity event. We had at this time, Bob and I were holding actual annual meetings for our shareholders, who were my sisters and our cousins. We would meet and go over the business, and we would teaching them about the business, learning about it, because that wasn't something the uncles necessarily shared with the family. They were running the business, and they didn't include us much in any of that. And a lot of our cousins and here are owners of the business, didn't really know much about the company. So we spent a lot of time sharing that, even to the point of doing some financial training, and how do you read an annual report, and what does this number mean? And it was really helpful for them to better understand and appreciate what we're doing with the business, and to offer input along the way. So in one of these meetings, one of the cousins said, it would be great at some point for us to have this liquidity event, and maybe we should think about 10 years away. Bob and I were 55 years old. So about the time you're ready to retire, let's mark that on the calendar. Why don't we sell the company about that time? That coincided with the financial demands on some cousins. They were going to have kids in college, and as opposed to providing large dividends to shareholders along the way, starting with the uncles and continued with us, we didn't do that. We instead chose to reinvest in the business and make the business stronger, buy new equipment, open new plants, open new markets. We saw that as a great investment in the business, and always figured that if you take care of the business will take care of the family. And that's exactly how it worked out. And given back to the 10-year runway we noted on the calendar, we knew exactly when we were going to sell the business. So we had the opportunity, I suppose, like a lot of business owners, we'll get to that someday, and maybe within a couple of years of that time frame, we'll get serious about how to do it. Well, we looked at it differently. It's we being Bob and I. We had we realized that we were the senior managers were just very active, kind of hands-on managers. And maybe that was a little too much for the business. Maybe we should rely more on our middle managers to help us run this company. So we spent a lot of time in training and strengthening and mentoring other associates in the business. Ultimate goal there was toward the end of the 10 years, we wanted to make ourselves redundant. We wanted to make ourselves unnecessary. We didn't want to operate the business. What we wanted to do was focus on the sale. And we had these discussions with prospective buyers, as an example, when they'd ask, so what have you been doing in the business over the past year? Well, my answer is, all I've been doing is working to sell the business. That's what I've been doing. I haven't been operating the business. I'm not a business manager like I used to be. I'm available to others in the business if, kind of like the servant leader idea. If you need some help, if I can help you anyway, I'll fly to Memphis and spend a few days. Happy to do that. So I did a lot of that, but I wasn't in charge. I wasn't running it. So the prospective buyers realized that management was running this company, running it well, profitably, without the owner's involvement. So we could retire, as we did, and it didn't affect operations at all. Okay. And it also gave, through this period, prepping for that day, it really motivated the workforce. They didn't know this was our strategy. They didn't know we were going to sell the business that year. But what they saw was us relying on them more, expecting more from them. I recall we had a plant manager in Juarez, Mexico, and he was asked to run a much bigger plant in Arkansas, and it was much more responsibility. And we knew he was up to it, and we'd support him, obviously. But he was surprised at that. He was surprised that we did that and thankful. And he says, I won't let you down. And he never has. It was a stretch for him, and he made it work. And he was thrilled that we asked him to do that. So again, we had a very capable management team in place when the day came. And it was that piece that was really helpful. Now, back to the 12 steps, if I might.
Please, yeah.
I'd have to say the first step, and this is going to sound familiar because Mike talked about it earlier. The first step, in my opinion, is figuring out what you want to do with your business. What is your ideal outcome here? Now, an ideal outcome for some could be, I want the highest price for my business. Write me the biggest check. I'm done, and here you go. Here are the keys. Okay, that's one possibility. Another, and this is how we approach this, was we want this business to continue. We want it to continue to strengthen, to grow, and we want it to avoid the synergies that some of these acquisitions employ, such as, let's lay off some people, let's close some plants or offices, and let's immediately save some money. Not at all what we wanted. We even had one private equity firm who was very clear about their intentions with one of the plants. They had another plant 100 miles away. They said, well, we're going to move all that production into our plant. We got some space there, and we're going to do that. I said, are you going to offer jobs to the workforce? Well, no, we only want your tooling and equipment, but we're not going to bring any of your folks. Well, our response was immediate. That doesn't work for us. Didn't matter what the price was. That doesn't work for us. So thanks for your interest. So they walked away. I think once the ideal outcome is formulated in your mind, that's what you want to do. That's the time then to bring in advisors to help you reach that goal. That step of having a advisor for such a transaction, and these are professionals who do this every day. They know, a lot of M&A stuff. They could be on the buy side or the sell side or both, but they know the process, which is critically important because you and I don't know that process. We're working in that world, and the particular attributes for that advisor are incredibly important. We interviewed a number of them, 5 or 6, I can think, repeatedly. Let's meet for lunch and just chat. Let's get to know each other. Let's get to understand who you are. We want you to know who we are. We want to be clear about our expectations from you, where we want to end up, and your specialties. And there's a lot of them out there, such as what industries do you represent? And it could be retail and not manufacturing, and it could be service, whatever it is. There are specialties out there. It could be a very highly regarded firm that kind of specializes in mega deals with large businesses. Well, that's great, but that is not what we are. And if they were so chosen because of their reputation, say, They won't have contacts in your field. They won't have the contacts for your size company, if you will, and you want to have a good outcome. So after numerous interviews, let's call them, and this is years before the event, I might add, we chose a firm, BDO out of Boston, who we felt was ideal for where we were and what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do is find a buyer who had experience in manufacturing, international reach, where we were already, but we wanted that support internationally. And we wanted the current organization pretty much to be left alone, to run by itself. Of course, after the fact, before the ink is dry on the purchase and sale agreement, they can do what they want because they own the company. But we got to know buyers very well and got to know what their intentions are because they were very clear about that. And we ultimately winnowed the field down to a few who could be seen as ideal. And 2 or 3 of them would have been perfect. They kind of checked all the boxes in terms of what we wanted. We wanted, stability in the business. We didn't want to concern our customers with, dropping a plant or laying off folks, because that would affect them directly. And aside from normal corporate functions, such as, mostly in finance, like advertising, everything else stayed with us. Our own HR, our own plant managers, our own R&D engineering department, our own customer service. It hardly changed. We weren't there. And I've heard from employees who would say, well, it's just not the same because they could walk down the hall and talk to an owner, if you will. They can't do that anymore. And the executive level interaction wasn't as personal, if you will. So there was something different and something some employees felt was missing, if you will, which they appreciated. But you still have your job. All your colleagues are here. Don't worry about us. You're doing fine. And generally, the headquarters, which for the U.S. operations is out in Minneapolis, continue to let here 6 years later, continue to let the business run as it did before. They continue to be profitable and they're growing. I continue to, and Bob, to continue to keep in touch with old colleagues. We have lunch every once in a while just to catch up, and they're doing a great job. We're really pleased at the outcome because we had our own demands, if you will, relative to what would happen.
Right, which might not be able to be addressed with private equity firms that can write the biggest check, like you said, you disband the plant, not offer jobs to other employees that you wanted to take care of. I know you had a number of bids for the business at one point, everything from said private equity firms to other folks that had specialized in manufacturing and lumber yards and things like that along the way. But how did you ultimately arrive at BDO Capital Advisors to direct you along the way? And did you find it daunting at all? Because that's a big firm, right? So there's definitely an expense associated with that a lot of times a business owner might not think of bearing, but give some color behind that. That'd be great.
Great, thanks. And this it speaks to the value of multiple interviews. So we got to know these people because of that. We met with them 5-6 times before we hired them. And they proved to us that, first of all, they had a small team that was devoted to us. We weren't going to, the Boston office is huge, but there were 4 people who were assigned to us, and one lead, if you will. And we had a chance to get to know them very well. We liked their style. We liked their focus. We got to talk to some of their past clients to get a feel for how they interacted and how well they did. And in every case, the references, if you will, were very, very strong and supportive of this group. So we felt that we had very personal service with a firm that had great resource. So we trusted them. They became trusted advisors even before we hired them. They were, that good. So given the global reach of that firm, once they were hired, in along the way when we were ready to kind of put our company out there, if you will, in their network, we had inquiries from all over the world. So it was exactly what we needed. So this opportunity was shared by the Boston office to, I bet they must have 60 offices around the world. Sure. So we were hearing from, London and in the Middle East and places we were surprised that showed that kind of interest and ultimately sold to a London-based firm. So but it goes back, Steve, I think, to the individuals involved and in their commitment to us was genuine, sincere, and absolutely made all the difference, especially because they had many contacts with in the manufacturing world, as well as in the private equity field, to gather a group of a dozen bidders who were very interested down the road after a lot of interviews with them and sharing information. There was one step in the process that was at our request. After we went through kind of first round of interviews and maybe even the second round, we had a smaller group that we were getting more interested in. So in these meetings usually are the opportunity to share our story and then sit back and take hundreds of questions from them. So we changed the script and we invited them to a meeting where we would ask the questions. We were looking for answers from them. One group actually says, well, we never did this before. Well, we want to do this. We want to understand your strategies and what you'd like to do with our business going forward. Very productive, because and this is where we learned about, that we're going to close a plant. Well, okay. We also learned other strategies from them, such as investing in our business. Most of these companies were a fair bit larger than us. They had more resources. They could grow the company faster than the family could because of their greater resources. And many of them recognized that we had a great benefit in a highly developed lean management system throughout our company. Every employee in the company was trained in using the lean tools. And we used to tell them, we have a team, every team member is a problem solver because they were trained to do that. And it took 15 years of training, but every employee was a problem solver, and we encouraged that. So ultimately, the buyer, who had multiple companies and multiple plants around the world, realized that's a skill we don't have. We don't have that continuous improvement system. And it's done wonders for the BILCO in many ways, in terms of employee motivation, in terms of lower inventories, in terms of faster delivery times to customers, in terms of increased profitability. All of these good things were occurring. And they wanted to share that and use our company as the teacher in their other plants. We were thrilled with that prospect. as an example.
That's extremely flattering. And just to go back for a second to something you mentioned earlier, you mentioned that throughout the generations there were bankers that said along the way, like place was after the Depression and everything, place was in danger of going bankrupt. Stop wasting your money on these ads, and your ancestors wouldn't do that because it helps to create the brand and the presence nationwide. And then you fast forward and you look at the folks who purchased the business, the UK-based company, and it's like the first thing that they said is BILCO has excellent brand recognition, enabling growth for other Amesbury Truth products. That's from the CEO of the buyer. So clearly there was some good thought and good people and good process behind what was happening as this business was growing, even though it might have evolved over some time, as it sounds like it had from your grandfather's and your uncle's days. Even holding the annual types of shareholder meetings where there was more financial discussions that were kind of out in the open, and more people becoming problem solvers, willing to get on the floor of the plant and get their hands dirty no matter what. Was that like a big transition from some of the other generations who had run the business before you?
Absolutely. And we learned all these techniques from one of our, more than one, but we had 3 outside directors join our board, and 3 family members, myself, Bob, and later Pamela Griffin, a cousin who was a CFO at Marlin Firearms, joined us as well. So these individuals convinced us, going the lean way, because they did their own businesses and did very well. And their advice overall, and I'd like to share this with all our listeners, was invaluable. Having outside directors on your board is incredibly useful. We were, before we did this, the uncles will go, well, nobody knows our business better than us, so why do we need these outsiders? Well, we need it because they know a lot of things that we haven't even thought of. And you bring that to the table, increase, to strengthen your business. It's really the lesson here. And I encourage my clients to do just that and find the right people who can help you bring their knowledge to the table. Happy to share that with you for the benefit of your growth.
Yep. And it sounds like just looking at, back at this, sometimes companies will try to do this kind of last minute without the runway for planning. Maybe they get 6-7 times EBITDA for a lot of sales in your type of space, but you guys sold the business for 9.5 times EBITDA, which is sizable. So you attribute most of that success and that outcome to really starting early and having multiple meetings and multiple interviews and really getting to know the folks who are behind buying the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key factors with this particular owner is that they're very large in residential markets in terms of door and window hardware. One of the biggest in the world. They had a limited commercial market, and for us, 3/4 of our business was commercial. So we had access to architects. I remember one meeting, I was describing a call from an architect. They go, "You actually talk to architects directly?" I said, I bet we have 25 new projects from architects every day. So they sat back and go, "We have to do this deal," because that was their entree to the commercial world, was a huge opportunity. So there's no doubt that affected the EBITDA as well.
Yep, that's why one
story of businesses can't develop the skill set themselves; they buy it, and they hope they can integrate it, and not always successfully. I have a story where the business bought a younger competitor. The sales of this younger competitor exceeded the buyer, and the buyer could never instill these sales skills in the business, and it didn't survive because of the debt they had to assume to buy the skill set.
And that's why one of the steps in those 12 steps is remove the owners from the critical path. The closer you are to something, the harder it can be to position it to other people, especially when you're talking about a decent sized business, domestic, international, expanded internationally, that it's not it's not a one size, fits all type of answer. There's a lot of moving parts here. So, to get some impartial opinions and to get some folks from outside of the family and maybe even outside of the industry, very important here. So you had 10-year runway to start. You got the right advisors involved, folks like Mike, who look at the risk management side of things and try to mitigate it wherever possible. Mike, you have some of your own stories from your travels. What do you think might have gone wrong with Roger and BILCO if they didn't start early and didn't have the right advisors? What are some other things that you've seen go wrong in your travels?
Well, in our discussions preparing for this, somebody came up with this phrase that I really liked, and it wasn't me. Having a runway gives you time to correct when things do go astray, because they always do. And even though Roger won't admit it, I'm sure there were some unexpected happenings that they probably didn't even notice were bumps in the road, because they had so many hours of discussion, and they could correct. It didn't become, it remained a bump instead of becoming a huge obstacle. So all those problems you didn't even know you had, Roger.
So there might have been some folks along the way that had different goals, even members of the family. Again, you have a large family that was involved with this as shareholders and people working for the business. Fast forward, you're 6 years past the sale date. What's the state of affairs? Everybody still talking to each other? Everybody happy with the outcome?
We are, and actually, next Saturday we've got a kind of a semi-reunion plan, and we're all going to go out and enjoy ourselves and kind of reconnect after the long COVID situation. So sure, we keep in touch. We're still very close. I think the feeling amongst the grandchildren, if you will, that this company and the hard work of a lot of people to get us to this point. All of this was a gift from our grandfather. There were no, expectations, if you will, and we were just so blessed to have the opportunity to have a liquidation event and have the shareholders, participate in that, and without acrimony, and everybody was pleased and thankful of how this worked out. Very unusual.
That was your grandfather's legacy.
Right.
To have a family, considering that he was genuinely the founder, not only of the business, but the family.
Right.
Worth more than anything you can get with MasterCard.
So just to kind of wrap things up here, the whole idea of define your desired outcome that both of you have really put on the table is important. And then choose the advisors based on that goal, because if you don't really have, kind of the old Alice in Wonderland type of adage, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. So you guys clearly knew where you were going and what you wanted to look like, what the epilogue of the story is going to look like. And then to Mike's point, what will the storybook say? Your story is written with decisions that you make every day. A lot of Mike's type of world is, plan for the worst, hope for the best. But, it's, hope is a relative term there. You want to execute with a certain degree of certainty, right? For the family and for the clients and the vendors that you're all partnered with. I know that you guys have partners out there that they don't look at you just as a building supplier. They look at you as real trusted advisors. Like we're never going to use any other products besides BILCO.
Right. Absolutely. And I got to say, Steve, we talked about a lot of things today, and thank you for that opportunity. The 10 years story, if you will, is proven in my mind in terms of the kind of attention you need to give to this process. So my advice to all our listeners, if you're a business owner who wants the right outcome someday and have a liquidation event, whether it's 2 years out or 5 years out or 10 years out, what you should be doing is starting that process today.
Yep. So that's a good segue into the first question that we have here. So the first question we received is, given that the preparation was so far in advance of the actual sale and liquidity time, how were you able to negotiate the fees with trusted advisors like BDO Capital Advisors?
Well, they actually came later. They didn't come 10 years before. where we spent our time in let's just say the first 5 years of that period was in strengthening the company, strengthening management, and being sure that as we got closer in, we would have colleagues who were running the business for the family. So that took a lot of time for Bob and I, and then Pam when she joined us. So as we were closing in, this is now, I think the company from a profitability standpoint, from a lean and continuous improvement standpoint, was becoming very much more valuable to a potential buyer. So having dealt with that growth, we planned that, we executed it, and it's in place. So this is becoming a more attractive acquisition for a lot of buyers. Then we turned to BDO for the last couple of years of working through the details of making this happen and ultimately with a successful outcome. So they were with us 5 years before, but there are things in any business that need to be dealt with. And I think the most important is the business is going to run well, should run well without you. So you walk out the door and virtually nothing changes. It continues to operate well. That's a huge challenge for a lot of businesses. And it's a big concern for buyers who see you retiring and they're left with some headaches and deficiencies perhaps in the business. Deal with that first. Just focus on that, get that done. So that takes that off the table and makes you much more attractive.
Yep. And I think that's something routinely that a lot of business owners miss, especially if they work up to the very last minute, decide they're ready to hang it up, say, all right, I'm ready to sell my business. What do you got for me? There is a lot of time spent on making it not dependent on the incumbent owners, CEOs, management team, et cetera, that will often get overlooked. So bravo to you and the way that you and the team executed everything. I got to ask this one more time before we wrap this up. If you could go back and change any one thing about the way that this went, what would it be, Roger?
Steve, I've been thinking about that question for a couple of weeks now. I don't know. It went so well, and no doubt Mike is correct. There were issues along the way that we dealt with, and we moved on. That happened, I'm sure. But there isn't anything in terms of major elements of this process that I would have done any differently.
Awesome. I know that you're big on the idea of governance, and we've spoken about governance in some other forums here, but just describing the policies, processes, procedures, really how organizations can really prosper. And I agree with the sentiment that a sign of a successful business is if you're able to get up and travel the world for a month or two and come back, and not only have you not really missed a step, you've actually increased your revenues and expanded your business model, you have a successful business. So really appreciate you being here with us again, Roger. Thank you so much for telling us the BILCO story. If anyone out there wants to see what a very ideal business succession plan looks like, definitely look at the story of BILCO and the transition that they made. Start with as much runway as you possibly can. Again, there might be a happy medium right between I want to retire tomorrow and giving it 10 years of runway. But the idea of 12 to 36 months is not necessarily an overnight discussion. This is something that does require some time to maximize the success and profitability of transitioning a business. But again, thank you both for joining us. Mike, thanks again for being here. As a reminder for everybody, the recording of today's webinar will be made available to everyone who's here today. Keep an eye out for additional discussions as part of the Business Solutions educational series brought to you by SDA Wealth Strategies on the fourth Wednesday of every month. Next month, we're going to be chatting about digital assets, big topic of conversation out there in a lot of different forums with some subject matter experts on the space. Again, thanks again, Roger and Mike, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great rest of the day. We'll see you again soon.
So long, everybody.
Thank you. Steve, I thought I'd hang on for a second. Maybe we